Dr. Lee Hanna stepped off the transport shuttle and into the massive docking bay of the Galactic Council station. The air tasted different here, processed and recycled through systems designed for a dozen different species. Her small travel bag felt heavy in her hands as she looked up at the enormous structure around her. The station was bigger than any city on Earth. Metal corridors stretched in every direction, filled with beings she had only seen in textbooks. Tall blue Altarians walked past with their heads held high, their skin glowing with natural energy. Groups of Centaurians moved together, their cybernetic parts clicking and whirring softly. The telepathic Cathara floated by without making a sound, their large eyes scanning everything around them. Hannah felt very small and very human. Dr. Lee, familiar voice, called her name. Ambassador Kong Minho approached with a warm smile. He was one of the few humans who had been working with aliens for years. His gray hair and tired eyes showed the weight of representing humanity in this vast galaxy. Ambassador Kong, Hannah bowed slightly. Thank you for inviting me to the summit. The pleasure's mine, Minho replied, guiding her through the crowded hallway. Though, I must warn you, the other delegates are not very interested in what humans have to offer. They walked through corridors filled with incredible technology. Walls displayed information in dozens of languages. Floating platforms carried supplies without any visible support. Everything here was beyond what Earth could create. Long until the presentations began, Hannah asked. 2 hours, Minho said. Are you ready? Hannah touched the small data pad in her pocket. It contained her research on human emotions and empathy. Years of work studying how humans connect with each other and understand feelings. It seemed so simple compared to the advanced technology around her. Hope so, she said quietly. The main council chamber was enormous. Thousands of seats arranged in circles, each section designed for different species. The center held a large platform where speakers would present their work. Above them, a dome showed the stars outside the station. Hannah took her seat in a small human section. Only 50 humans were at the summit, compared to thousands of other beings. She watched as delegates from across the galaxy filled the chamber. Many looked at the human section with curious eyes, as if they were studying strange animals. The presentations began with the Altarian delegation. Speaker Vorthok, a tall being with bright blue skin and golden eyes, stepped onto the platform. Energy crackled around his hands as he spoke. People of the galaxy, his voice boomed through the chamber. We, Altarians, have mastered the very forces that power the stars. Watch. Vorthok raised his hands and created a ball of pure energy. It grew larger and brighter until it filled the air above the platform with light. The energy ball split into smaller pieces that danced through the air like living things. The crowd gasped in amazement. With this power, we can provide energy to entire worlds. We can defend against any threat. We are the guardians of galactic civilization, Vorthok said proudly. The chamber erupted in applause. Several delegates stood and cheered. Vorthok smiled and returned to his seat, the energy display fading away. Next came the Centaurians. Commander Thex, whose body was half organic and half machine, demonstrated their cybernetic abilities. Parts of his body transformed into different tools and weapons. His computer brain solved complex mathematical problems in seconds. He showed how Centaurian technology could enhance any species. Logic and efficiency, Vex announced. These are the keys to galactic progress. Motion and instinct are weaknesses that hold back true advancement. More applause filled the chamber. The Centaurians had built some of the most advanced ships and computers in the galaxy. The Cathara delegation presented their telepathic powers. Without speaking, they shared thoughts and memories directly with the audience. Everyone in the chamber could suddenly feel what it was like to read minds and communicate without words. The experience was overwhelming and beautiful. Each species presented something incredible. The Vorthani showed their ability to manipulate gravity. The Kelthans demonstrated their mastery over biological systems. Every presentation displayed power, technology, or abilities that seemed impossible. Finally, Ambassador Minho stood up. The human delegation would like to present our research. A few delegates looked interested, but most seemed bored. Humans were the newest members of the galactic community. They had no special powers, no advanced technology, no unique abilities. Hannah walked to the platform on shaking legs. The chamber felt even bigger from the center. Thousands of alien eyes watched her. She activated her datapad and began to speak. My name is Dr. Lee Hannah. I study how humans understand and share emotions with each other. Already, she could hear quiet laughter from some sections. A few delegates were talking among themselves, not paying attention. Humans have developed complex emotional intelligence, Hannah continued. We can read facial expressions, understand tone of voice, and feel what others are feeling. We call this empathy. Speaker Vorthok made a loud sound that might have been laughter. Emotion is weakness, he called out. These are just crude chemical reactions in an underdeveloped brain. More laughter came from the Altarian section. Some Xanthorians were making clicking sounds that indicated amusement. Even some of the smaller species seemed to find the presentation funny. Empathy allows us to work together, Hannah said, her voice becoming stronger. When we understand how others feel, we can help them. We can solve problems together. We can build trust. Vorthok stood up from his seat. Another word for weakness? Power is what matters in this galaxy. Strength protects worlds. Energy feeds populations. Technology advances civilization. What can feelings accomplish? Several delegates began leaving their seats. The Kayata section was completely empty now. Only the humans and a few curious beings remained to listen. Emotions help us understand each other, Hannah said to the shrinking audience. They help us care about others, even those who are different from us. Different, like inferior. Someone called out from the Xanthorian section. Ambassador Minho looked embarrassed. His hands were clenched tight as he watched his species being mocked. Other human delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Hannah finished her presentation to an almost empty chamber. The few remaining delegates seemed more interested in their own conversations than her words. As she walked back to her seat, she could hear comments in various alien languages. She did not need to understand the words to know they were not kind. Well done, Minho whispered as she sat down, but his voice sounded tired. They think we are weak, Hannah said quietly. Perhaps they are right, Minho replied. Perhaps humans do not belong among these advanced species. As the summit continued with closing ceremonies, none of the delegates paid attention to the readings on their long-range sensors. Deep in space, something ancient was stirring. Something that had been sleeping in the dark between galaxies for thousands of years. The sensors showed an energy signature unlike anything in their databases. It was moving toward their sector of space, and it was massive, but the delegates were too busy celebrating their own superiority to notice. They had more important things to think about than mysterious signals from empty space. After all, what could possibly threaten the combined might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations? In her small quarters that night, Hannah studied the same sensor data that everyone else was ignoring. Something about the energy pattern seemed familiar, though she could not explain why. She made notes in a research journal, adding the readings to her collection of unusual phenomena. Outside her window, the stars looked peaceful and eternal. Nothing in the quiet darkness suggested that everything was about to change. The alarm bells started ringing at 3 a.m, station time. Hannah woke up in her small quarters as red lights flashed on the walls. The emergency announcement came through the speakers in dozens of languages. All delegates report to emergency stations. Unknown entity approaching the system. This is not a drill. Hannah quickly dressed and ran toward the main command center. The corridors were filled with confused aliens rushing in every direction. Some looked scared, others angry at being woken up. The Altarians were glowing brighter than usual, which meant they were either excited or worried. The command center was chaos. Dozens of species crowded around the main display screens. Commander Chonari, the station's human security chief, was trying to coordinate with alien military leaders. Her voice was calm, but Hannah could see the tension in her shoulders. "What is it?" Ambassador Minho asked as he appeared beside Hannah. "Something big," Chonari replied without looking away from the screens. "Really big." The main display showed a three-dimensional map of local space. A red dot was moving toward their system, still far away, but getting closer. K. Numbers scrolled beside the dot, showing size and energy readings. Speaker Vorthok pushed through the crowd to the front. "Show me the detailed scans," he demanded. The display changed to show energy patterns and mass calculations. The numbers were incredible. The approaching object was larger than most moons. Its energy signature was unlike anything in the galactic databases. "Possible," whispered Dr. Yuan Jiho, Hannah's research partner. He had arrived quietly and stood beside her, staring at the readings. Nothing that big should be able to move so fast. An elderly human stepped forward from the back of the crowd. Elder Kim Taiyang was the oldest human on the station, a philosopher who had spent his life studying ancient galactic history. His face was pale as he looked at the display. "I have seen patterns like this before," he said quietly. "In the old records. The very old records." "What records?" Commander Chonari asked. "Stories from civilizations that no longer exist, Elder," Kim replied. "They called it the Void Leviathan. A creature that sleeps in the empty space between galaxies." Several delegates laughed. "Myths and legends," Speaker Vorthok said with contempt. "We are dealing with a real threat, not bedtime stories." "The myths say it destroyed entire star systems," Elder Kim continued, ignoring the mockery. "Civilizations that grew too proud, too aggressive, too focused on power instead of wisdom." "Enough fairy tales," Vorthok snapped. He turned to address the crowd. "This is obviously some kind of weapon or ship built by an unknown species. We'll destroy it before it reaches our territory." The Altarian military forces were the first to respond. Their energy-powered ships launched from the station and nearby worlds. Bright streams of light shot through space as their weapons charged up. The ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls glowing with the same energy that Vorthok had displayed during his presentation. The Zenthorian cyber fleets followed. Their ships were geometric and precise, covered in sensors and weapons that could adapt to any threat. Commander Thex coordinated their attack patterns with computer-like efficiency. The Cathars sent their psionic warriors, beings who could attack with pure mental force. They flew in ships that moved without visible engines, guided by thought alone. Hannah watched the tactical display as the combined galactic fleet approached the mysterious entity. Hundreds of advanced warships from a dozen species, armed with the most powerful weapons in known space. "It is slowing down," Dr. Jiho observed, "like it knows they are coming." The entity had indeed changed its movement pattern. Instead of flying straight toward the system, it was now moving in a slow spiral, almost like it was studying the approaching fleet. "First contact in 30 minutes, Commander Chonari announced. The command center fell silent as everyone watched. The displays, the galactic fleet, spread out in a wide attack formation. Energy weapons powered up, missile systems locked onto the target. Then the first ships reached weapons range. The Altarian attack began with streams of pure energy, the same power that could fuel entire worlds. The beams struck the entity and seemed to disappear into its dark surface. No explosion, no damage, nothing. The Xanthorian ships fired next. Guided missiles and particle beams hit the target with mathematical precision. Again, nothing happened. The weapons simply vanished into the creature's mass. The Cathara warriors tried their psionic attacks, mental force that could crush minds and bend reality, struck the entity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, something changed. The creature began to glow. "It is absorbing the attacks," Dr. G. Ho said in amazement. "Every weapon that hits it makes it stronger." The entity, which had been dark and hard to see against the empty space, now pulsed with captured energy. The glow grew brighter with each attack, and as it grew brighter, it began to move faster. "All ships, cease fire," Commander Cho Nari ordered over the communication channels. But it was too late. The creature had absorbed enough energy to power a small star. It moved toward the fleet with terrifying speed, its massive form casting shadows across the ships even from thousands of kilometers away. The first ship to be caught was an Alterian destroyer. The crew had only seconds to scream before their vessels simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone. The creature's body rippled like water as it consumed the ship. Panic spread through the fleet. Ships began retreating, but the creature was too fast. It reached out with parts of itself, extending dark tentacles that could stretch across space. Every ship it touched vanished completely. Back on the station, the delegates watched in horror as their most powerful military forces were destroyed in minutes. The readings showed that the creature was still growing larger and stronger with each ship it consumed. "What is that thing?" someone whispered. Elder Kim stepped forward again, his voice shaking. "The Void Leviathan. The end of civilizations, that forget wisdom for power." As if responding to his words, the creature stopped its attack on the fleet. The surviving ships fled in every direction, their crews too terrified to maintain formation. The entity turned toward the station and began moving in their direction. But as it approached, something strange began happening to everyone on the station. Pressure filled the air, like the feeling before a thunderstorm, but much stronger. Many of the aliens began holding their heads and crying out in pain. The Xanthorians were the first to be affected badly. Their precise, logical thoughts became confused and frightened. Several collapsed as their computer-enhanced minds struggled to process what they were experiencing. The Alterians lost control of their energy powers. Light flickered around them randomly, and some began glowing so bright that others had to look away. Their confidence was replaced by raw terror. The Cathara suffered the most. Their telepathic abilities, normally so controlled, were overwhelmed by the creature's presence. They could feel its ancient thoughts pressing against their minds like a crushing weight, but the humans seemed less affected. They felt the pressure and the fear, but their minds remained clear. Hannah noticed this immediately. "Why are we not going crazy like the others?" she asked Dr. Jiho. "I do not know," he replied, helping a Xanthorian delegate who had fallen to the floor. "But we need to figure it out fast." The creature was getting closer. Long-range sensors showed it would reach the station in less than 6 hours. And with each passing minute, more aliens on the station were losing their ability to think clearly. Commander Cho Nari was coordinating evacuation procedures, but where could they go? The creature had destroyed the most powerful fleet in galactic history. No weapon seemed able to stop it. "We need to understand what it wants," Hannah said, quietly. "What it wants is to destroy us," Speaker Vorthok shouted. His blue skin was flickering with uncontrolled energy, and his golden eyes were wide with fear, just like it destroyed our ships. "No," Elder Kim said, his voice growing stronger. "The old stories say it does not destroy randomly. It tests, it judges, and those who fail the test." He did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone could see what happened to those who failed. Outside the station windows, the stars seemed darker than before. And in that darkness, something vast and ancient was coming closer, carrying with it the weight of cosmic judgment. The delegates who had laughed at human emotion and empathy just hours before now looked to the humans with desperate hope. If the old stories were true, if this creature really was testing them, then perhaps the species they had mocked might be their only chance for survival. But first, they needed to understand what the test was, and they were running out of time. 4 hours until the creature reached the station. Hannah sat in the emergency research center, surrounded by data screens and ancient records. Professor Shen Wu-jin, a human expert on galactic history, worked beside her. The station's AI, called Echo, projected information holographically in the air around them, while military leaders argued about impossible evacuation plans. Hannah focused on understanding the creature's behavior. The data from the fleet attack showed something important. The Void Leviathan had not simply destroyed the ships randomly. "Look at this pattern," she said to Professor Shin, pointing at the tactical display. It attacked the most aggressive ships. First, the Altarian destroyers. Professor Shin nodded. They fired the heaviest weapons. Then the Zenthorian battlecruisers, which kept attacking even after the first ships were destroyed. But here, Hannah highlighted several points on the display. It ignored the medical ships and supply vessels. Echo's artificial voice filled the room. "Analysis confirms. The entity targeted ships based on weapon power and aggressive behavior, not strategic value or threat level." Dr. Jeho entered the room carrying more data tablets. His face was tired but determined. "I have been studying the creature's energy patterns. Every time it absorbed an attack, it grew stronger. But not just. Bigger, more complex." "What do you mean?" Hannah asked. "The energy readings show it is learning from each attack, understanding the weapons, the tactics, even the thoughts behind them." Professor Shin pulled up ancient records on his screen. "I found more references to creatures like this in old databases. The Melkari civilization wrote about something similar before they disappeared 3,000 years ago. The records were fragmentary, translated multiple times through different languages. But the story was consistent. A massive entity that appeared when civilizations reached a certain level of technology and power. The Melkari called it the Great Filter." Professor Shin read from his screen. "They wrote that it came to test whether a species was ready for true advancement or if they were still trapped by primitive instincts." "What kind of test?" Dr. Jeho asked. "The records are unclear. But every civilization that faced this test either transcended to a higher level of existence or disappeared completely." Through the research center windows, they could see refugee ships arriving at the station. Beings from dozens of worlds fleeing the approaching entity. But something troubling was happening among the evacuees. The Altarians had taken control of the best shelter areas, using their energy powers to keep other species away. They claimed they needed the space for their superior energy beings. The Zenthorians had calculated that sacrificing smaller species would give larger species better survival chances. They were actually creating lists of who should be abandoned. First, the Cathara, overwhelmed by the creature's psychic pressure, had stopped communicating entirely. They huddled together in isolated groups, ignoring everyone else. "The other species are falling apart," Dr. Jeho observed sadly. "Fear is making them forget everything they claim to believe about galactic cooperation." But the humans were different. Human aid workers moved through the refugee areas, helping anyone who needed assistance. They shared their limited supplies equally, regardless of species. When alien children were separated from their families, humans helped reunite them. Captain Park Somin, the station security chief, had organized mixed teams of humans and aliens to maintain order. She treated every being with the same respect, whether they were powerful Altarians or tiny squib traders. Why are we behaving differently? Hannah wondered aloud. Echo's sensors have been monitoring the station's population. Stress hormone analysis shows humans are experiencing the same fear levels as other species. However, human behavioral patterns remain stable, while other species show significant deviation from normal social structures. Professor Shen looked up from his research. Perhaps it is connected to what you presented at the summit, human emotional intelligence. Hannah thought about her mocked research. While other species had developed amazing technologies or special abilities, humans had spent thousands of years learning to understand each other, to work together despite differences, to feel empathy even for strangers. The creature feeds on negative emotions, she said suddenly. Fear, anger, hatred. That is why the attacks made it stronger, and why the aliens are being affected more severely. Dr. Jiho added, fear is turning into aggression and selfishness, which feeds the creature even more. Echo projected new data. Long-range sensors detect the entity's approach speed has decreased by 15% since refugee operations began. It is slowing down, Professor Shen said. Why? Hannah studied the patterns again. The creature had been moving faster as it absorbed the fleet's attacks. But now, as humans worked to help others, despite the danger, its approach was slowing. Cat is watching us, she realized, studying how we respond to the crisis. Commotion in the corridor interrupted their work. Speaker Vorthok burst into the research center with several Altarian guards. His blue skin was flickering with unstable energy, and his eyes held a desperate look. You will give us priority access to the escape pods, he demanded. Altarians are too valuable to lose to this disaster. Everyone gets equal access, Captain, Park Somin said firmly, following him into the room. Those are the evacuation protocols. Protocols written by inferior species, Vorthok snarled. We have the power to protect ourselves. We deserve to survive. Deserve? Dr. Jiho asked quietly. Based on what? Based on our superiority, our energy mastery, our importance to galactic civilization. Your energy powers could not stop the creature, Hannah pointed out. They only made it stronger. Vorthok raised his hands, energy crackling between his fingers. Do not test me, human. Your pathetic species has no right to lecture us. The energy buildup was detected immediately by Echo's sensors. Alarms began to sound. But before Vorthok could attack, something unexpected happened. A small, squib child, one of the refugees, ran into the room crying. She had been separated from her family again and was scared. Without thinking, Hannah knelt down and gently comforted the child. Speaking in soft tones, despite the crisis around them, Dr. Jiho immediately began searching the refugee databases to find the child's family. Professor Shen offered the small being some food from his personal supplies. Even Captain Park Somin, despite facing an armed threat, took a moment to reassure the child that everything would be okay. Vorthok stared at them in confusion. His energy attack dissolved as he watched humans risking their own safety to help a being from a species most people considered unimportant. Why? He asked, his voice losing its angry tone. Why do you care about something so small and weak? Because she is scared and alone, Hannah said simply, still holding the child. Being strong does not mean we ignore those who need help. Echo sensors detected another change. Entity approach speed has decreased an additional 8%. Through the research center windows, they could see human teams continuing their rescue work. Ambassador Minho was negotiating with various species leaders, convincing them to share resources fairly. Elder Kim was speaking with frightened refugees, offering comfort and wisdom to anyone who would listen. Slowly, some of the alien species began to change their behavior, too. Fuse and Thorians started helping with medical care, their logical minds recognizing the efficiency of cooperation. some younger Altarians began using their energy powers to provide light and warmth for the shelters. Instead of threatening others, the Cathera remained isolated, but even they had stopped actively competing for resources. The creature is responding to our behavior, Professor Shen said, studying the latest readings. The more we work together, the slower it moves. But it is still coming, Dr. Jiho pointed out. We have maybe 2 hours before it arrives. Hannah looked at the data one more time. The patterns were becoming clearer. The creature was not just testing their military power or their technology. It was testing something much more fundamental. It wants to see if we can evolve, she said, quietly, not technologically, but socially, emotionally, whether we can grow beyond competition and fear. And if we fail the test? Warthog asked, his voice now uncertain rather than aggressive. Echo displayed the historical records Professor Shen had found. Dozens of civilizations that had faced similar tests. Some had transcended to become something greater. Others had simply vanished from history. Then we joined the list of species that were not ready, Hannah replied. Outside, the creature continued its approach. But for the first time since the crisis began, its speed was decreasing instead of increasing. The test was not over, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were beginning to understand what was required to pass it. The real question was whether they could change fast enough, whether the other species would follow humanity's example before time ran out. 1 hour before the creature would reach the station, the emergency council meeting was unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had never agreed on anything were now forced to work together or face extinction. Hannah stood before the assembled delegates in the main chamber. The same room where she had been mocked just days before was now filled with desperate faces looking to her for answers. Speaker Vorthok sat quietly in his chair, his earlier arrogance replaced by uncertainty. Commander Dex's cybernetic parts clicked nervously as he processed scenarios with no logical solutions. The military approach has failed, Ambassador Minho announced to the crowd. Our weapons only made the creature stronger. We need a different strategy. What strategy? Demanded Counselor Tech, a reptilian Vorthani leader. How do you negotiate with something that destroys entire fleets? We do not negotiate, Hannah said, stepping forward. We communicate. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Several delegates spoke at once in different languages. Echo's translation systems struggled to keep up with the chaos. Possible, Commander Dex stated flatly. The entity shows no recognizable communication patterns, no language signatures, no technological interfaces, because we are looking for the wrong kind of communication, Hannah replied. We are trying to talk to it like it is a machine or a government. But what if it communicates through emotions and intentions? Dr. Jiho activated a holographic display showing the creature's energy patterns. Every time our behavior changed on the station, the entity's movement patterns changed too. When we became more cooperative, it slowed down. When conflicts broke out, it moved faster. You're suggesting it reads our thoughts? Asked Elder Yin, one of the few Cathara who could still speak clearly. Not thoughts exactly, Professor Shen explained, joining the discussion. But emotions, intentions, the basic feelings that drive behavior. Remember, this creature has existed for millions of years. Kana's civilizations rise and fall. It knows how to read the signs of a species' true nature. Speaker Vorthok stood up slowly. His blue skin had stopped its erratic flickering and now glowed with a steady, dim light. If this is true, then why does it not simply destroy us now? Our military forces are scattered. Our defenses are useless, because the test is not over. Yet, Hannah said, we still have a chance to prove ourselves worthy of survival. Worthy, according to what standard? Commander Dex asked. Hannah looked around the chamber at the faces of dozens of different species, each one unique, each one afraid. but all of them here together, despite their differences, according to whether we can truly work together, not just in treaties or trade agreements, but in genuine understanding and cooperation. Captain Park Soman entered the chamber with urgent news. The creature has stopped moving, is holding position just outside our defense perimeter. Echo projected the new readings. The massive entity was indeed stationary, floating in space like it was waiting for something. It is giving us time, Professor Shin realized. Time to make our choice. What choice? Several delegates asked at once. Hannah took a deep breath. She knew what she had to propose would sound impossible, even dangerous, but it was their only chance. I want to make direct contact with the creature, not with weapons or technology, but with pure emotional communication. The chamber fell silent. Everyone stared at her as if she had suggested jumping into a star. That would be suicide, Elder Yin whispered. The psychic pressure from that creature would crush your mind instantly. If I do not go alone, Hannah said, I need representatives from every species here. We make contact together as a unified galactic community. Absolutely not, Warthog said immediately. I will not risk Altarian lives on this human madness, and you condemn us all, Dr. Jiho said quietly. Because if we cannot pass this test together, we will all die separately. Commander Dex's computer brain worked through the calculations quickly. Its probability of survival through military resistance, less than 1%. Probability of survival through Dr. Lee's proposal, unknown but greater than current alternatives. I will go with her, Ambassador Minho announced. If humans are willing to risk everything to save everyone, then I will stand with them, Captain. Park Somin stepped forward. I volunteer as well. One by one, other beings began to volunteer. Dr. Jiho, of course, Professor Shin, even Elder Kim, despite his advanced age. Several younger Altarians who had helped with the refugee operations. A few Xanthorians who had worked alongside humans in the medical centers. Some Cathara who were still able to function despite the psychic pressure. But it was not enough. They needed true representation from all the major species, including their leaders. I will go, Elder Yin said suddenly. The Cathara leaders, telepathic abilities were damaged, but her mind was still strong. If this creature communicates through emotion, then my people's empathic gifts may be useful. Speaker Vorthok looked around the chamber. His fellow Altarians were watching him, waiting for his decision. The pride and arrogance that had defined his species for generations poured with the growing realization that their survival depended on cooperation. If I agree to this, he said slowly, and if we survive, how do we know the galaxy will be different? How do we know we will not simply return to the old ways of competition and conflict? Because, Hannah said gently, we will have faced something greater than ourselves together. We will have learned that our strength comes not from power over others, but from understanding each other. Commander Dex stood up, his mechanical parts whirred as he made his decision. Logic indicates that cooperation has higher survival value than competition when facing extinctionally level threats. I will participate in this communication attempt. Finally, Speaker Vorthok nodded. Very well, but how exactly do we communicate with something so alien? Hannah had been thinking about this problem since the creature first appeared. We create a harmony of emotions. Each species contributes their unique perspective, their special abilities, their way of understanding the universe. Together, we make something beautiful instead of destructive. Ko had been monitoring the creature during their discussion. The TT energy patterns are shifting. It appears to be responding to the emotional changes in this chamber. The AI was right, as the various species had moved from fear and competition toward cooperation and understanding. The creature's energy signature had become more complex, more organized. It is waiting for us to be ready, Professor Shin observed. The volunteers gathered in the station's main communication array. The chamber was filled with technology from a dozen worlds, but they would not be using any of it. Instead, they formed a circle in the center of the room, beings from across the galaxy holding hands. Despite their vastly different biologies, Hannah closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, not toward the technology around them, but toward the consciousness of her companions. She felt Dr. Jiho's steady determination, Ambassador Minho's protective love for all species. Captain Park summons courage in the face of the impossible. The Altarians contributed their connection to pure energy, the force that powered stars and gave life to worlds. The Xanthorians offered their logical perspective, their ability to see patterns and solve complex problems. The Cathara shared their empathic gifts, deep understanding of emotional connections. Together, their combined consciousness reached out into space toward the massive entity waiting in the darkness. At first, there was nothing. Then, slowly, carefully, something reached back. The contact was overwhelming. The creature's mind was vast beyond imagination, ancient beyond comprehension. It had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, had seen countless species rise to greatness only to destroy themselves through pride and hatred. But in that contact, Anna felt something unexpected. The creature was not cold or hostile. It was sad. It's profoundly, deeply sad. It had been alone for so long, carrying the burden of cosmic judgment by itself. It's hoping always to find a civilization that could understand and perhaps share that responsibility. Through the link, the creature shared its memories. Species that had failed the test, consumed by their own aggression and fear, but also species that had passed, transcending their limitations to become something greater, something worthy of guiding others toward wisdom. The test was simple in concept, but difficult in practice. Could a civilization move beyond survival-based thinking? Could they choose cooperation over competition, understanding over dominance, wisdom over power? As the communication continued, Hannah realized something wonderful was happening. The creature was not just testing them, it was teaching them, showing them what they could become if they chose the path of unity over division. The contact lasted only minutes. But in that time, every being in the circle experienced a fundamental shift in understanding. They saw themselves not as separate species competing for resources, but as part of a greater cosmic community with responsibilities to each other and to the universe itself. When the connection ended, they opened their eyes to find the creature had moved closer to the station. But instead of feeling fear, they felt a strange sense of anticipation. The final test was about to begin. The void Leviathan hung in space before the station, like a dark mountain floating among the stars. A massive form blocked out entire sections of the galaxy behind it. Energy patterns rippled across its surface like slow lightning, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Hannah stood in the observation deck with the other volunteers from the communication attempt. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the creature clearly for the first time. It was not the monster they had imagined. Its shape was flowing and organic, almost like a vast space whale with parts that shifted and changed constantly. "Is waiting," Elder Yin said softly. Her telepathic abilities were still damaged, but she could sense the creature's patient presence. Ambassador Minho checked the station communications. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Every major world had detected the creature's arrival. Panic was spreading through dozens of star systems. Some species were preparing to flee to distant galaxies. Others were gathering their remaining military forces for a final desperate battle. "They do not understand," Dr. Jiho observed sadly. "They think this is still about fighting." "We have to show them," Hannah said. "We have to prove that there is another way." Speaker Vorthok was quiet, studying readings from the creature. His energy powers had stabilized since the communication attempt. The frantic flickering was gone. replaced by a steady, controlled glow. During the mind link, he said slowly, "I felt something I have never experienced before." The creature was not angry or destructive. It was lonely. It has been carrying this responsibility alone for millions of years. Commander Thex nodded, his cybernetic parts working smoothly now instead of clicking nervously. Logical analysis confirms. Entity's behavior patterns indicate a desire for contact and understanding, not conquest. But how do we prove to the galaxy that we have changed? Captain Park Soman asked. How do we show that we can work together permanently, not just during a crisis? The answer came from an unexpected source. Echo, the station's AI, had been monitoring communications across the galaxy. Incoming transmission from the Kelkari system. They are requesting immediate assistance with the planetary evacuation. The Kelkari were a small species, technologically weak compared to the major powers. Their home world was experiencing massive earthquakes that threatened to destroy their civilization. Under normal circumstances, the larger species might offer some token assistance, but resources will go to more important allies first. This is our chance, Hannah realized. We showed the galaxy what cooperation really means. Within hours, something unprecedented began happening. The same species leaders who had been planning to abandon each other to save themselves were now working together to help the Kelkari speaker. Vorthok led a team of Altarians to provide emergency energy for evacuation ships. Their power, which had been used for weapons and dominance, now lit up rescue operations and powered medical equipment. Commander Dex organized Xanthorian ships to calculate the most efficient evacuation routes. Their advanced computers and cybernetic precision helped coordinate the movement of millions of refugees. The Cathara, despite their damaged telepathic abilities, worked to calm panicked populations and help families stay together during the chaos. But it was the humans who served as the coordinators, the bridge between all the different species. Hannah found herself working with Ambassador Minho, facilitate communication between groups that had never cooperated before. Dr. Jiho helped translate not just languages, but cultural concepts and emotional needs. Professor Shin used his knowledge of galactic history to predict potential problems and suggest solutions. Captain Park Salmon coordinated security in a way that made every species feel protected rather than controlled. The Void Leviathan watched it all. As the rescue operations expanded, its energy patterns became more complex and beautiful. The dark surface began to show colors that had never been recorded before, swirling patterns of light that spoke of approval and growing hope. More requests for help came in from across the galaxy. Natural disasters, medical emergencies, conflicts that needed mediation. Each time, the combined galactic community responded together. Species that had been enemies for generations began working side by side. The transformation was not easy. Old prejudices and habits were hard to break. The Altarians still sometimes acted superior. The Xanthorians occasionally tried to solve everything with pure logic. The Cathara withdrew when emotions became too intense, but humans were there too, help bridge the gaps. When the Altarians became too proud, humans reminded them gently of the strength found in humility. When the Xanthorians ignored emotional factors, humans showed them how feelings could improve logical decisions. When the Cathara became overwhelmed, humans offered comfort and understanding. "We are becoming something new," Elder Kim observed. The elderly philosopher had been watching the changes with wonder. Not just an alliance or a treaty, a true community. The creature began to move again, but not toward any world or station. Instead, it positioned itself at the center of the galaxy's major shipping routes. Its presence was no longer threatening. It became a landmark, a meeting point where species came to learn from each other. Delegations from across the galaxy traveled to meet with the creature and the beings, but first to make contact with it. Tana found herself serving as an interpreter between cosmic consciousness and mortal minds. Her research on empathy and emotional intelligence, once mocked as primitive, was now recognized as the foundation of interstellar diplomacy. Months passed. The galaxy settled into new patterns of cooperation and mutual support. Trade routes became cultural exchange programs. Military alliances transformed into research partnerships. The competition for resources was replaced by collaborative efforts to help everyone thrive. But the most remarkable change was in the creature itself. The lonely ancient guardian was no longer alone. It had found what it had been searching for across cosmic ages, a civilization mature enough to share the responsibility of cosmic stewardship. One day, Hana was called to the observation deck for an unprecedented event. The void Leviathan had approached the station directly, its massive form filling the view outside the windows. As she watched, something incredible happened. The creature, this being of unimaginable power and ancient wisdom, began to lower itself before the station. Its movements were slow and deliberate, unmistakably intentional. The gesture was clear to everyone watching. It's the strongest life form. Record, the cosmic judge that had tested civilizations for millions of years, was kneeling before them, not in defeat or submission, but in recognition and respect. Speaker Vorthok stood beside Hannah, his expression filled with awe. "It is honoring us," he whispered. "Honoring what we have become." But Hannah understood something deeper. Continued connection with the creature. She could feel its thoughts. It was not kneeling before their power or their technology. It was kneeling before their humanity, their capacity for growth, their willingness to choose understanding over dominance. The creature was acknowledging that they had passed the ultimate test. They had proven that consciousness could evolve beyond survival-based thinking, that beings could choose cooperation over competition, wisdom over power. In that moment, as delegates from across the galaxy watched in stunned silence, the cosmic order shifted. Humanity, the species that had been laughed at for studying emotions and empathy, became the bridge between the mortal and the eternal. The creature began to share its cosmic knowledge directly with the galactic community. Secrets of space and time, technologies beyond imagination, wisdom accumulated across eons. But more importantly, it shared the responsibility of guiding younger civilizations toward their own moments of transcendence. Dr. Lee Hannah, the young woman who had once stood alone on a platform being mocked for her research, now stood as humanity's first representative to the Cosmic Council. Her work with emotional intelligence and empathy became the foundation for a new age of galactic civilization. The galaxy had learned that true strength was not found in energy weapons or cybernetic enhancements or telepathic powers. True strength was found in the courage to understand, to care, to reach across the void between different forms of consciousness and build bridges of genuine connection. And in the depths of space, where the void Leviathan had once wandered alone through cosmic darkness, there was now light, the light of understanding, cooperation, and hope for a future where wisdom would guide the galaxy toward ever greater heights of consciousness and compassion. The test was over. The real journey was just beginning.